whole lot of people who are real sports fanatics. If it wasn't for ESPN, they probably wouldn't be sports fanatics, or at least not quite as much as they seem to be now. We were offered this thing about 2 years ago when I visited an NAB show. A gentleman came up to me and said, would you like a TV mobile unit? It was one of ESPN's first TV mobile units. And I was sharing a booth with another museum, so I got them in on the conversation. And they said, well, yeah, they'd like it, but they didn't have any place to put it. I said, well, I'm not sure I got any place to put it either. And besides, where is it? And they said, well, it's in near Providence, Rhode Island, Cranston, Rhode Island, to be specific. It's been parked for about 10 years. After the people that had it had used it for quite some time after ESPN got finished with it. But when we all went to high definition TV, all of a sudden this was totally obsolete. So it ended up coming here. It was quite an adventure getting it here because it's so tall. It had to be trucked. We tried to drive it down here, actually. Boy, that was a mistake. We hired a guy who had actually done a lot of mechanical work on it in the past to go through it and get it a DOT inspection, replace a whole bunch of radiator hoses, a whole new radiator, in fact, take the fuel tanks off and boil them out because they were full of goop from sitting there for 10 years. It was a pretty forlorn mess, and this thing was full of junk and stuff inside. And he got it running, and everything seemed fine. And we had some people that had arranged to come and pick it up and drive it down here. Well, turned out the guy that was going to do that didn't know how to drive it. And he ripped the clutch out of the thing just outside of New York City. So the adventure continued as we had it towed off of Interstate 95 at 2 in the morning for about $900, as I recall, and taken to a truck repair place who were very nice. And we found a clutch in El Paso. And since this was the fall, we were thinking it's going to snow pretty quick. And once it snows, this thing, it needs to be gone. So I had a clutch air freighted in from El Paso, and they put it in. And just as they got it all done, here comes the snow, about 4 feet of it, in fact. And this thing was pretty immobile until about March, late March of next year. Couldn't get it out because the snow plows had plowed it in, and it was just a horrible mess. So finally, it thaws, and you can get to it. And the trucking company shows up to go drive it, and now they found out the turbocharger on the diesel engine's not working, and it won't go over 45 miles an hour. So rather than change the turbocharger, because the people that had it at the truck repair place really didn't like working on antique vehicles, I can understand that. You know, it's a whole specialty. So they said, you know, you really just need to truck it out of here. So we ended up getting a heavy equipment moving company to move it. It cost the earth because this thing had to have special permits. It's 13 feet tall as it is, and then you put it on top of a 30-inch or 3-foot high trailer, and all of a sudden you're not legal. So it has to have special permits, has to have escorts in many states. They have a truck that goes in front of you with a stick that sticks up however high you are, and if you hit something, he's supposed to stop and you're supposed to stop. And it was a major nightmare. The guy that brought it down here came in a huge truck. It was 85 feet long, just the truck that carried this. It was big. It was impressive watching the guy drive it through downtown Kilgore. If I was driving it, I'm sure I would have driven over curbs, taken out people's cars, just drive right over the rear end of somebody's SUV or something. It was amazing that he could maneuver it so well. But that cost a fortune. So we got it down here, and it was by this time it was summer, and it was really hot. And this thing was full of trash and junk and equipment and all kinds of stuff inside here. And we couldn't get the air conditioning to work. couldn't figure out how to. All the controls for it were buried under piles and piles of cable, which we had to pull out. It was so hot in here. It'd be about 120 degrees inside this thing on a nice summer day. And we could only stand to work on it for about maybe 10, 15 minutes at a time, and that was it. We were done. So not much happened until last fall, when we finally decided, let's move it inside. And then we discovered it wouldn't go through the door. Oops. So, one thing led to another. This has just been a comedy of errors, actually. So we had to modify the overhead doors to get in and out of the building. And we finally got it inside maybe 2 months ago or so. We've been working on it ever since. Inside, it's much more comfortable, so it's worked out pretty well. And we've made a lot of progress, and it's a really neat piece of broadcasting history. I mean, sports and TV are so closely aligned. It's been a major cash cow for TV, of course, but a whole lot of people who are real sports fanatics, if it wasn't for ESPN, they probably wouldn't be sports fanatics, or at least not quite as much as they seem to be now. And we think this thing's been to lots of interesting places, too. We know it did World Cup tennis. I was watching one of ESPN's inaugural programs. It's actually the one they signed on the airways. I found it on YouTube not long ago. And they were talking about the lineup for the evening. And, right after this special 30-minute program about what ESPN is and how great it is and how wonderful it's going to be and how you're just going to think you died and went to sports heaven, they're going to have highlights of some college football games for the next program. And then they're going to have 2 different programs that are softball. And I nearly fell over. I mean, softball is great. The guy says, well, everybody likes softball because that's what we all sit and play after you've had a few beers.
Yeah.
Operating a broadcast museum like ours is an expensive proposition. Your $10 donation pays for about 6 hours of electricity or about a half a day's worth of our insurance.